F sharp, A sharp, revisited.
Hello everyone and welcome to F sharp, A sharp revisited, the music review podcast where we take a look at the new music releases and let you know what we think. I am Joe, the music critic, reasonable person, and with me with his typhoon of opinions is Nick.
I'm going to start this off by saying I am very sorry. I am a jinx. I ruin technology as it comes near me. So in the space of 1 week, both my my refurbished new iPod and my laptop have both broken.
R.I.P.
So we're using Joe's equipment this week.
Yeah, this should be a callback to our very first episode with laptop
and because my laptop has had to go to the laptop repair shop, I have lost all of my notes, which I made about the music releases this week. And because my iPod is broken, I haven't had much opportunity to listen to the releases this week. But I'm going to try my damnedest to give coherent
and excellent
opinions.
Let's see how it goes. Well, first off on our list is Young Fathers with their new album Cocoa Sugar, released 9th of March, 12 songs, 36 minutes.
I chose this one because I thought that once again our picks were looking a little bit, not guitar heavy, but
rock based. Yeah.
So I thought, I've never listened to Young Fathers before, but I've heard good things about them. Let's talk about them. So, as far as I'm aware, this is their third release.
Yep.
After their previous one that came out 2 years ago called White Men Are Black Men Too, which is a bit of a controversial name, I think.
Yeah.
Especially
I even want to go into why I don't like that name?
Yeah.
But
I haven't listened to the album. I don't know if it ties in.
Perhaps we shouldn't be judging it, but yeah.
Yeah, so this new album is called Cocoa Sugar. It is 12 tracks long, and this album's fine. I like it, but I don't love it.
I think I'm the same. I think it's because it is like a lo-fi experimental hip-hop record is a very generic label you can slap on it.
Lots of R&B influences on it, some soul, some more experimental hip-hop moments, but
I think it's the lo-fi aspects that I struggle with, because I do struggle with that kind of music, like lo-fi and ambient music in general, when it doesn't grab me enough. And just to take an example that we reviewed last year, Mac DeMarco's This Old Dog took that very low-key approach, but for me it worked because there was a lot of thematic interest and some, deeper meanings, especially towards the back end of the album, whereas on an album like this, like Cocoa Sugar, they're fine tracks, there's nothing really wrong with them, but I'm not really getting drawn back to them as much as I'd really like to be.
As I was listening to the album, I was sort of thinking to myself, what's the word I want to use to describe this album? And it's not dull, because the album definitely isn't dull. There's some interesting moments on it. I decided that the word I should go for is blunt. It just doesn't really have any edge to it, and I think that does partly come from the sort of lo-fi aspect of it, without anything to carry it through, like the thematic elements. So it's just a very blunt sound to me.
Yeah, I'd agree. And one thing I will say now before I forget, that maybe it just isn't the right album for me and you, and that others would absolutely love this sound. It just probably isn't quite for me, because there are tracks that are really good on this album.
I'm perfectly happy to listen to this album. In fact, I would go as far as to say there isn't actually a single track on this album I don't like, but there aren't any that particularly stand out to me. The one exception I would suggest is the song Toy.
Oh yeah, I liked that one a lot.
Toy, I thought, was probably the most interesting track on the album. The sort of scattery backing to it, and
the tense beats, and then you've actually got some quite good rapping on there as well, which sticks out against the rest of the album, which is a bit more restrained.
But the problem is with that track, it's 11th out of 12 tracks, so it comes a bit late, I think, to really, if I hadn't listened to the album once, starting from halfway through, I probably wouldn't have noticed it as much, because sometimes I do find if I listen to an album, just all the way through from the beginning each time, once I get towards the end, I do get a bit of listener's fatigue. So
yeah, I can kind of see that.
It's a good track.
I think it just needed a few more tracks like Toy sprinkled in towards the middle and the beginning as well. But then again, I thought the opening track was quite strong as well. See how I liked the bass and the brassy synth stabs. Those worked well amongst, there's a lot of good production on this album as well, I think, in terms of a lot of the airy, dense synths that helps relax you into the moods that the album's going for. So that's another track I quite liked as well. And then, is there anything else? I liked Wow as you know what? Wow reminded me of the King of Limbs quite a lot. So if I this is like the King of Limbs hip hop version. That's how
I did see someone describe Young Fathers as if Radiohead made a hip hop album. Not sure how much I agree with that, but on songs like Wow, I do get what you mean.
You do see that, yeah.
The only other thing I would suggest is I'm not completely convinced by the opening to the track Turn with the very screechy vocals. Just found that a little bit too jarring, personally.
I can see that. For me, that wasn't a bother, but yeah.
Besides that, I have no really strong opinions on this album.
It's hard to as well, because a lot of the lyrics are very... I mean, they're not bad. They're just by the numbers. I don't think there's really that many tracks that really make that much of a strong statement. I mean, I like in the first track, see how the line, what's the price of the lights when you're stuck in the shadows? I mean, that's got a bit of meaning to it. That's quite cool.
I had lyrics written down from this album as well, but I wish I could tell you what they were.
Like, there are some good moments, like in Lord, while the government wants to control our country, will set you free. There's some things behind there that's quite nice, but because it's such a relaxing record, that's the feel of the record. I think they take the approach of not making their statements too strong. This album is supposed to be easy listening. I think that's what they were going for, and I think they succeeded. I think they succeeded in that.
It is easy to listen to. Shout out to Toy. That's about it. I would give this album sort of just a decent 6.
I just want to say, one track that I wasn't so keen on was actually the second track, Fee Fi. It had, I mean, the vintage production feel is nice, but I don't think they did it particularly well with the piano wasn't particularly invented. So that's the only track I'm not too keen on. I mean, while I would personally give this a 6, I do think that's unfair when I'm very conscious that this perhaps just isn't the album for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do reckon that a lot of people would probably like this a lot more than I would. So in someone else's, like, I think if this album was for me, it could probably go 2 points higher. But
yeah.
6.
Yeah. So check it out if it sounds like the kind of thing you're interested in. But I think for now we'll move on to the second album by Ed Schrader's Music Beat. It's called Riddles, and I think this album is bloody fantastic. For me, this has gotten better and better and better with every single listen I've given it. I just... well, to describe their sounds, it's like
post-punk.
This
is a post-punk album.
It's not just post-punk, though.
A lot of it is very much post-punk, and that really surprised me that you were offering up this album for us to talk about.
Okay, well, it takes the auditory aesthetic of post-punk, but it takes the compositional palette of art rock and also the compositional philosophy of electronica, and that's what makes this album so special to me. The compositions are so polyrhythmic and rhythmically engaged. It's like the rhythms seem to bleed up from the drums into every single aspect of the album, and it just creates this frenzy of groove that's just so damn satisfying to listen to, especially in the first half of the album. And then if the first half of the album focuses on the rhythms, and the second half there are just so many moments that are just absolutely gorgeous. That there's only one track that I think is weak on this album, and that's Wave to the Water, where not much happens, but the rest of the album is solid gold. Absolute solid gold.
Okay, I would disagree. Not to the extent that I think this album is bad, not at all. I think there is a lot of great stuff on this album. I don't think it's as good as you do.
Okay, why is that? Why is that?
For a start, I think that the final 3 tracks didn't really do much for me. Humbucker Blues is, I wanted it to go somewhere. It just builds up and then peters out.
Of course it goes somewhere. So the guitar chords that they use are so deliberately harmonically placed to draw out the depth of the sound. That's what's so good about it. And then as the reverse sounds pile on top of it towards the ends, it creates this really, really nice ambience. It's a gorgeous track.
Yeah, I didn't get that. It's 2.5 minutes long, so it's a pretty short track, and I was expecting the vocals to come in for it to build up a bit more, drop a bit more, go somewhere. As it is, it's perfectly nice instrumental track, but I wanted more from it. And then with tracks like Tom, Something I did find a problem with on this album, at least when it's played by itself, is the piano. Very much sounded me to be like a keyboard that they're trying to make sound like a grand piano. I thought the production on the keys was pretty bad.
Okay, that's just a terrible opinion, Nick.
Unless it was mixed in with other parts.
No, Tom and Riddles, which is another piano-led track, are easily the two best songs on the album, and the piano is what makes them so visceral and so engaging. It's beautiful on both of those tracks.
I think you're taking advantage of me not having notes to just put my opinions down.
No, you're just wrong on this one. Tom is so, it just has this. It starts off simple, but then crescendos into this beautiful descending piano motif that this air that's so somber in that track as he sings I Remember Tom is so haunting, and it's so lovely, and it's so nice.
And I didn't think much of Dizzy Devil either.
Dizzy Devil was fantastic. That is the best song in terms of the percussive elements.
Sorry, I didn't think much of Wave to the Water either. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough, because I agree.
And Culebra... I don't have much to say on that one.
Culebra was fantastic because every single bar, it felt like there was a wave of sound coming over you. You've got this very dense, rich guitar underneath piano and then partway through the saxophone. And it just feels so rich as they all come in together like a wall of sound that it kind of feels like you're drowning, but as you're drowning, you're picking out these murky qualities that, as they come over you, it just sounds so rich and so engaging, and it's like things reaching out to your ears, and I could just get lost in that song.
I think the saxophone was the saving grace of that track, personally. I just thought it was a bit too dull up until that point. Would you like to hear me say some positive things?
I very much would, actually.
My favourite two tracks on this album are right next to each other, and they are Rust and Kid Radium.
Two fantastic tracks.
Both relying quite a lot on the bass and drum element that is so present in the first half of the album. Rust, the energy of that song is insane, followed by that wonderful passage of synth in the middle, which just comes out of nowhere. It's so ethereal and just gorgeous and wavy.
Because it's like a double guitar and synth, but they layer on top of each other as they go do 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 do, and it's so nice. And the bass line to Rust,
and the vocal performance on that song is so savage.
Yeah, it's amazing. Really good.
And
really
then
good.
Kid Radium, I just love the way that the lyrics fit in with the composition on that track, and I love the chorus as well. It's really catchy.
Yeah, and the harmonies on that track are just so rich and nice as well.
I would also like to give a shout out to Seagull. Seagull has got one of the best bass lines on the album. I love how that song just proves that the bass can stand by itself without the heavy percussion. But then even then it does build up and it does come in, and the song becomes a lot more grand as it works its way through. And I think it's perfectly paced.
Yeah, I'll just want to cover the tracks I think that were more rhythmically interesting. One of them was Seagull, because halfway through you get these very electronic pattering drums, which you'd think would sound weird against this very kind of classic bluesy bass line, but somehow they make it work. They just make it work, and then as all the instruments come crashing in and then just get taken out, it's so satisfying to listen to. And then the two tracks, Dunce and Dizzy Devil. Dunce and... I'm a dunce.
On Dunce, very much channeling his inner Ian Curtis on that one, I think.
Yeah, but again, it's just the way the rhythms bleed up into the rest of the song. It's so... I use the word polyrhythmic a lot, but it is, and that's what I find so satisfying about it, especially with those distorted vocal noises that layer up over the bass, and then the drums coming in just to highlight exactly how rhythmically interesting the rest of the instruments are. It's so satisfying. And then Dizzy Devil has those pattering, rolling drums roaring up like an engine before going into the song that just has... It's intense, but you can hear every single detail in it. It's so great to listen to.
You okay,
I need
Joe?
to take a breath.
I think you need to take a breath. You've talked a lot on this album.
Okay, I think I've got most of the points out of the way. I just want to highlight what is probably my favourite track, which is Riddles. Has just this lovely glistening piano which just skits about above the other punkier instruments, and again, it's the way it layers up with its rhythms and harmonies. They have such a keen sense of texture that I just love in this album.
I mean, I quite like that song just as soon as the piano stops playing by itself. What can I say? You think I'm wrong?
Okay, well, needless to say, I rate this album very highly. It has been on repeat for me, and I reckon it will do for a lot of the year. I just think their use of rhythms, harmonies, and texture is so ingenious on this album. This is the kind of album I listen to, and I just think, I wish I could compose music like this.
I would like to point out that this album has punk elements in it, and Joe is singing its praises, so it's you know, it must be pretty special.
So I'm going to very happily give this a 9 out of 10.
Decent 7. Yeah, it's got good points on it. I think it's also got its bad points.
Okay, well,
But, you know, you feel free to disagree with me.
We'll move on. I'll highly recommend it to everyone, but we'll move on. We've got some singles we want to talk about. Firstly, Everything.
Yep, they released 2 new tracks off of their upcoming EP, which is meant to be a companion to A Fever Dream. So, do you want to do these together or one at a time?
I mean, I don't mind, because I mean, I'll get my one thought out of both of them straight away, is that I'm not really completely sold on either track, if I'm going to be completely honest. But I do like both, but I kind of feel like they have opposite weaknesses.
I think they're pretty different tracks.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that they share mostly is I think there are the themes of masculinity in the lyrics.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm not sure the lyrics on either of them are that great.
See, I agree with you on Breadwinner.
Yeah, Breadwinner's lyrics are ridiculously abstract to the point that they're kind of distracting in how weird they are.
That's exactly the point I'd written down here. It's like, because everything's lyrics has always been quite esoteric, but there's always been like a central theme or a central hook or something that grounds it all together. But here they seem to be getting so abstract and esoteric that they're risking losing meaning. Yeah. I definitely don't want to see them do lyrics that are more esoteric than here.
Yeah, I think go back to songs like Distant Past and No Reptiles for that sort of level of metaphorical lyricism. With the Miarana, I think that the lyrics aren't great, but for a different reason, which is that while I think that the lyrics are a lot less abstract on that one, and I do like the symbolism of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the ocean, as a metaphor for depression. I thought that was great, but then it doesn't really go that far with
it
the
doesn't
metaphor.
Tie it all in.
There's the first verse, the second verse, which are quite similar, and then the chorus, and then for the last quarter of the song, it's just the chorus repeating various lines over and over again. I just would have liked more. I
will say that this song has probably got some of my favourite lyrics they've done, like as single lines. The devil took me underwater, he filled my lungs so I could change. And in the next verse, the ice was forming all around me, the plants were climbing me for light. That I found quite potent. But again, like you say, it's just tying it all in and, you know, making that one point at the end where it's the climax where everything's coming together isn't quite there. So I do like the Miarana lyrically, but musically that one didn't strike me as much.
I mean, Everything have always called themselves a math rock band. I'm not sure how mathy they are compared to certain other ones, but you know,
they're not that mathy.
Going by that, this song is very plain. I mean, it's kind of beautiful in a way, but at the same time, it just sort of passes by. I remember getting to the end of the song and being a bit let down.
Yeah, you'd expect this to be like track number 8 on one of their albums, or something like that.
For a band as kooky and just mad as Everything have the potential to be, I just wasn't as interesting as some of their other stuff.
Yeah. Then again, I think some of the slower tracks on A Fever Dream I thought were quite good, but even then they were a lot more engaging and a lot more interesting 100%. And had a lot more going on.
Like the title track, A Fever Dream.
Yeah. But then Breadwinner, I loved the catchy piano bass line.
Yeah.
Of course I loved that, and you've got the dissonant guitar in the bridge, that works quite well.
There's such a great dark tone to that song. Especially when paired with the music video. I don't know if you've watched it.
Oh, the glitching person,
It's really creepy. It's got such a great energy to it. And I actually think it's one of the best vocal performances they've done for quite a while in that song. It's just a shame that the lyrics are just so...
Yeah, and it's the hook as well, if You've Got to Be Kidding Me, isn't really that strong because
You gotta be kidding me! You gotta be kidding me!
I mean, it's catchy. It's catchy though. But when I say it's not that strong, it doesn't tie everything in together, and it doesn't really feel like it means all that much when you can't really make sense of the rest of the lyrics.
And then you got the bits where you're shouting, power, 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 power,
power, power, power, power. It's a bizarre track. It's not a bad one. I'm happy. No, it's one of those tracks I'm happy to listen to.
Of the two, I think Breadwinner's probably the better.
Breadwinner's better, definitely. But I'm hoping that when they do release their next full album, that they'll kind of rein in how bizarre their lyrics can be sometimes, and just make something a bit more meaningful. That's all I want.
Though it is nice that they're releasing this EP. I will say that I didn't expect it so soon. And I'm sure it will probably be interesting to compare it to A Fever Dream if it is meant to be a companion piece.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move on.
Let's move on to Janelle Monae with Make Me Feel. So, I wanted to highlight this track because...
It's fucking incredible.
It's the best pop song so far this year, if I'm going to be honest.
I adore this track.
It's... To get any if you can call these criticisms out the way, it does rely on some standard pop practices. It is based off 12-bar blues, and it does take its inspiration from Prince, who I love.
Yeah, but there's no... there's no bad thing taking inspiration from Prince.
There's nothing bad there, and what makes this song so good is the details that she puts into it. Like, at first I didn't think I could get behind the tongue clicks in the beat, but after a while I thought they were actually quite nice. And then, the thing I love most about the song is those guitar stabs that go in on the bridge.
Yeah,
as well.
The bridge of the song is... there are no words for how good it is.
So damn satisfying.
Yeah. And it just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the semitonal, descending semitonal notes
so
in the
good.
Chorus. So amazing.
It's like I'm powerful with a little bit of tender and emotional sexual bender.
And the vocal performance on this song is
good.
Fantastic.
It's so good.
And just the song in general is fun, it's sexy, it's intense.
It's catchy, it's great.
I've liked Janelle Monae for a while. I've never actually listened to any of her albums. I've just never gotten round to it. But I've really enjoyed songs like, Tightrope, the first song I ever heard by her, is such a catchy marvel.
Yeah,
this is new levels of pop genius.
This is my current pop song of the year.
Definitely go and check it out. I'm not going to hide the fact that this is my track of the week.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'd just like to give a quick shout out to the other single she released at the same time, Django Jane. Less to say on this one because it's quite a different song. While Make Me Feel is a high energy pop track, Django Jane is a more rap influenced, more introspective piece. I think it's quite short and to the point. It's just a 3-minute track. I think the backing is it fits around her lyrics and performance quite well, and the lyrics are pretty good, but the song is just completely eclipsed by how amazing Make Me Feel is. I think it was a really bad idea to release them at the same time.
I agree. I agree.
Don't get me wrong, Django Jane is a good track. It's
just not as good. No. She was better off releasing Make Me Feel first and then going up to the album, then maybe Django Jane, or if she's got another single in mind. But
I'm very much looking forward to when the album drops.
Same.
That's one we're definitely going to be covering, just so we can talk about how amazing Make Me Feel is again.
That's just the way you make me feel. Oh yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop now before I embarrass myself.
Yeah, let's bring everything down now by talking about something that's terrible.
So I thought, we've covered a great pop track. Why don't we
cover something terrible?
It was before I even listened to the song. I went message.
Oh,
Nick.
Look, it's Quavo.
It's like Quavo. You remember that song with Nicki Minaj and Quality Control?
She for Keeps.
She for Keeps, and how it was awful and how we hated it. Well, Quavo's featuring on another track.
This time with the always amazing Iggy Azalea. I've never heard of Quavo before, Is She for Keeps, and now I've heard him twice, and that's twice too many.
Isn't Quavo... I'm pretty sure he's one of the members of Migos.
I've never heard of Migos.
Oh, they're the terrible trap hip-hop group.
Well, anyway, I hate Quavo. I've heard 2 things by him now, and I wish I hadn't. I want him to go away.
Fair enough.
On this track...
So let's talk about Quavo's contribution.
Yeah,
to this.
Can we talk about how obnoxiously loud it is in comparison to the rest of the track?
Yeah, we can talk about that. It's unnecessary.
Yeah,
it's
because
it's so bad.
The lyrics, like the composition of the entire track, is boring. To be honest,
dum 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 ad
and you've got
infinitum.
that sort of. It's not quiet, but it's very sort of I can just sit there and let it wash past me, sort of thing. And then Quavo comes in, and it just peaks.
With auto-tune. Yeah. I've been looking for Saviour times infinity
and
again.
You can hear they've used some sort of limiter on that track to stop it from clipping when he comes in and just shakes the room with his terribleness.
I don't understand. Well, the chorus is so bad as well. It's literally, I've been looking for a saviour. I've been looking for a saviour. I've been looking for a real one to hold on to. I've been looking for a saviour. That's not a bloody chorus. That's nothing.
And just the composition and structure of the song is so uninventive. It's just verse, chorus, chorus.
It's as standard as pop gets.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about Iggy.
I don't want to talk about Iggy Azalea. She's crap. Can we move on?
She is. She is. I mean, I don't really have anything.
She's another one of these people who said she's going to save rap music, I believe.
Did she say that?
I believe she said that at one point. She's done the Jaden Smith thing, but with less interesting production.
I have. Yeah, I have no. I'm trying to force myself to say something because I found her. I mean, her performance isn't terrible, but it's not good either. That's the thing, and her lyrics aren't particularly inventive. She's certainly not saving a genre.
No, the lyrics match how boring the instrumentation is.
Pretty much, and there's that really annoying. Yeah. In the song, do you remember that? That comes in halfway through. It's supposed to give it a bit more oomph, but completely doesn't.
I do now.
So that's our terrible pop song of the podcast.
I will say, of all of the songs I've heard Quavo in, this is the least terrible.
Okay, so She for Keeps is just that little bit worse.
Oh, not even that little bit worse.
Oh, well, it is
much worse. This song is bad. That song is an abomination.
I think I dislike Saviour more just because it reeks of laziness so much, and I cannot see any humour in it. It's just one of those songs that makes me feel like my brain cells are completely dying as I'm listening to it. So I think I want to stop talking about it.
I'd like to give a quick shout out to something which I haven't mentioned to you yet, but I haven't actually been able to listen to the proper version of this song yet because my laptop is broken, so I can't use any of the streaming services. Because, as we all know, Spotify on mobile is terrible.
Yeah, don't work.
Yeah, so The Tallest Man on Earth has come out today and said he's going to be releasing a new song for every month in spring. The first one came out today, it's called An Ocean, and I love it. It's stunningly beautiful, it's got wonderfully ethereal lyricism, and that's all I can really say. I haven't heard the official version, I've heard he did an explanation video and then played a solo performance of it in the video, but it's great. Go and listen to it.
I'll look forward to it then.
I do worry that the official version might be overproduced like his last album was, but we'll have to see.
We'll see. Sometimes the live versions are just better.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Let's move on
to what I think is going to be Joe's album of the podcast.
Well, it's certainly tied with spoiler alert, Ed Schrader's Music Beat.
This album is your sort of album.
It is exactly my sort. So this is Dead Magic by Anna von Hausswolff, released on the 2nd of March. So Anna von Hausswolff is part of this movement of musicians recently bringing a lot of gothic and doomy sounds, almost post-rock sounds as well, into a lot of some very kind of epic long-form material. I
was trying to decide what genre I would call this, and I decided that the term funeral pop is probably
I think
fitting.
That's good. I think that's fitting. I mean, there hasn't really been a genre coined for this movement yet.
It's lots not of big. Drones, lots of heavy instrumentation, but also quite delicate.
Yeah, there's other musicians have been doing it, but it just hasn't really got that label yet. But
if you want to I would say that this album is a mixture of Kate Bush and Swans.
not bad.
That's the closest I could get.
I mean, yeah, because her voice is somewhat similar to Kate Bush's as well. I thought it was like a cross between Kate Bush and Bonnie Tyler, because it's very quirky, very outlandish, very expressive, and it's also quite raspy as well on certain tracks, really bringing that emotion out in some of the longer form tracks. But I think what I want to say, why I think this album resonated so much with me, is that while there are other artists doing music like this, what was so special to me about this album was how this wasn't led by musical progression, it was led by her emotions. And that's what structures the pieces, and that's what made them so impactful for me, because she made me feel what she wanted to make me feel. And maybe that's a very, subjective personal thing, but I do think there are elements that are just so well executed here that you can't really ignore them. Where do we start?
I'd just like to cut in for a second and say, in all honesty, I've only managed to listen to this album twice. I did not have enough time to listen to this album before my laptop broke. I brought it the day before my laptop broke, so...
Oh, okay, so... some more general opinions then from Nick, maybe, but I kind of just want to go into what, for me, is clearly the best track on this. I like all the tracks, but clearly the best track is
Ugly
the central track, yes. Ugly and...
I knew you were going to say.
Ugly and Vengeful, and it's 16 minutes, so it is a long track, but it isn't unnecessarily long. It starts with these drones, this church-like noise, this ambience, that it kind of sucks you in to this very tense atmosphere. 5 minutes in, when her vocals and the organ comes in and she sings, I'm not going to try singing like her because I will fail miserably. When she sings I'm heavy like a storm, you then just immediately feel that all these clouds have been forming, and she makes you feel like it's becoming grey, the clouds are becoming so dark and it's going to get let loose. And that seems to happen over the midsection of the song, as it gets... So it's not aggressive, but it's very dense with emotion, with the layers from the synths and the organ and guitars all wavering in each other. They're like shaking at each other. It's so volatile and it's so expressive.
Do you want to take a second to catch your breath?
It's so hard to describe without actually listening to it, the experience of listening to it. But then... and then on Ugly and Vengeful, it has by far her best vocal performance. It's not too loud, and I think that works well, because when she's really going for it, she's so dynamic. It pierces through the other instruments in a way that's not overbearing, but you can hear so much of what she's feeling. The dynamic notes right at the end of Ugly and Vengeful get me so much. It sends chills down my spine. She is so dynamic, and you can feel this catharsis just oozing out of her, which then bleeds into the final two tracks. So Ugly and Vengeful, strong contender for track of the year for me at the moment. I love that track a lot. I should talk about some of the other tracks now.
Would you like me to say something so you can take a second to catch your breath?
Yeah.
I'm just going to preliminarily say now that my final thoughts and opinions on this album have not been solidified yet, and I reckon this album could be anything between a light 7 to a strong 8 for me, because there's a lot to admire about this album. One point I would like to make, which you're going to disagree with me on this one, and that's completely fine. This will be completely personal to me, and I don't think anyone else in the world will think this, except my dad, who I mentioned it to this morning, and he agreed. Which is, okay. There's something I've noticed recently, which is with language. Because, English is sort of the business language of the world. When people leave their own countries, a lot of the time they'll just speak in English. I mean, I was watching a film recently called Tony Erdmann, which is a German film. And as soon as the characters in that film left Germany, they were all speaking to each other in English because, that's sort of the language of the world in a way. And it's sort of the same in music, which is that a lot of the time when artists want to be recognised, they'll have to sing their songs in English to get popularity in any other country.
True, yeah.
I would have loved to hear Anna von Hausswolff sing her songs in Swedish. I think that the clear emotion she's feeling might have come through in her performance a bit more. Not to say they don't already, but I think if she'd sung it in Swedish, it could have had even more impact. But her vocal performances as well, I do think that sometimes she does wear her influences on her sleeve a bit too much, and sometimes it feels to me like she is trying to sound like Kate Bush.
No.
I don't. You can disagree with me on that one. That's just personal.
No, I disagree that she sounds too much like Kate Bush. I do see your reasoning behind wanting her to sing in her native language. I do see that because, you know, I listen to a lot of Japanese music, and sometimes I do hear songs where they're clearly struggling with enunciation, trying to sing in English where it might have just been that bit more fluent in Japanese. On this album, for me, her vocal performances were so strong. I didn't hear any problems with, you know, her trying to sing in English. So I'm fine with her making that creative choice. But I think it would have been equally as strong an album if she sung in Swedish and I didn't understand it, because she was so powerful with her emotions in her performance. Fair point. I'll give that to you, Nick.
The only other point I need to make on the album, which you will disagree with, is that I think the final track, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce, I will let Joe do it.
Callan's Atterup Standellis. Might be
that. I think, considering that the track is 7.5 minutes long, I think it just ends too abruptly. And that caused the album as a whole to leave me wanting more. I think for a track that's so long, it's got plenty of time to create a proper outro and let me coast out of the album on that. But as it is, I mean, the album's only 5 tracks. Even if it is still a decent length album because of the track length,
47 minutes.
It does still leave me wanting more because of that.
Okay, I think I had a different philosophical experience than you in terms of engagement with this album, because Ugly and Vengeful is the central track, and that is the track where everything that she wants to get expressed is expressed, and then the final 2 tracks is then dealing with the catharsis, dealing with this powerful surge in energy, because the penultimate track...
I haven't read the lyrics of this album yet. I haven't listened into them as much as I would like to, which is the main reason why I think there's such scope for my opinions to change.
I think that's fair enough, but I do think instrumentally you've got that such power in Ugly and Vengeful, and then the Marble Eye is like starts off as a solo organ piece. It's so calming, so reflective, and it goes through it sounds quite dark, but then it has these passages of acceptance going into the Ionian mode, and I thought I heard some Lydian mode as well.
Joe.
You're doing
it again.
The Lydian mode is the brightest mode, and it matters. It matters in terms of the compositional effects, and it ends with these passages of warmth before going into the final track, which almost seems to be like a reversion back to the initial state. It's got these sinister sounds in it, you know, all these drones, this ambience, the organ, the guitars. It still sounds creepy, but there's a lot more major inflections, and I think that brings the album to a philosophical close where the catharsis has allowed Anna to heal in a way. She's not completely healed, or she's not completely better, or however you want to phrase it, but she's in a place that's a step forward from the beginning of the album, and that's what was so cathartic to me about the last track. I'm just thinking about how it ends, and it does seem to end abruptly, so I can see why that might be a point against the album, but the track as a whole does bring it to a conclusion.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I want to mention something positive, which is by far the best point of the album is the discordant organ melody at the end that sort of comes in twice towards the end of Ugly and Vengeful.
Oh yeah, the do 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 do.
That bit gives me such chills.
It's so sinister, but so
it comes in at such an amazing point in the song after all that build up and release and build up and just waves of sound washing over you. It's like a big tidal wave.
Yeah, sinister and creepy, and I love it.
And I
love it.
This album just made me wonder, how do you even record a pipe organ? How would you set up the microphones for that?
Well, all I know is that they recorded this in the Mabel Church in Copenhagen. So obviously they went to a big organ in a big... I mean, the acoustics in the album sound amazing. I know the rest of the instruments were done in the studio, but the organ just sounds so dynamic. And Anna von Hausswolff actually was a student in architecture, and I just think that's such a nice little detail because churches, at least these Gothic churches, have such incredible dynamics. I mean, they were designed for, the speakers to be able to project their voice, and it would go around the room and everyone can hear it, and it would be bold, it would be emphatic, and that dynamic translates to music so well. Honestly, if I had all the money in the world, I'd get like a church built and then just make it my recording studio. It sounds so rich, so good. We haven't even mentioned the first two tracks.
No, I was about to say.
I think we do need to wrap up, so I'm just going to say they're great. The Mysterious Vanishing of Electra, the second track, is one of the shorter tracks. It's probably the one track...
one of the shorter tracks at a breezy 6 minutes long.
It's the kind of... If you're unsure as to whether you want to dip your toe into this album, I'd probably say give that one a go. It's a very emotionally led piece with many of the instruments and the rhythms matching the chiming of church bells. Another evocation I thought was really nice, very powerful throughout this album. It's expressive, it's dynamic, it's quirky. It's a great track and a great representation for this album. I think that will then give you more to go on this album that is just that little bit better. And then the first track is the other epic, 12 minutes long. I feel like I don't have time to go through it all like I did.
Because you've already spent so much time talking about Ugly and Vengeful.
That I'll just say, I thought it was a great track. I loved it. So, yeah. I would recommend this album. It's a good album. So yeah, I've gone on about this album for long enough. I'll say at the moment it is a strong 9, mid 9 to strong 9. I think the only thing that's holding me back about this album is that it's not as experimental within its genre as I perhaps would like to be, to give it like that super high score.
Yeah, this genre that we're not even sure what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do think this album's niche is in how it's composed and how powerfully it is led by Hausswolff's emotions, and I think that is something that resonated with me and will resonate with a lot of people. So I'm just going to give it good 9 out of 10 for this podcast.
I can't give it a proper review or score, to be honest, but it's definitely an album I will come back to. I recommend it. For now, I'm going to give it a light 8, so as not to annoy Joe too much.
A non-committal 8.
Yeah, non-committal 8.
I think that's fair enough. I think we should move on to
the final album of this podcast. And as we all know, Joe is a huge fan of Between the Buried and Me. In fact, have I brought a single classic album to this podcast which you haven't disliked?
I mean, Kate Bush was kind of both of ours, and I loved that. Well, the thing is, you chose punk.
Okay, I did choose death metal, and then I chose punk.
The Queen is Dead.
I suppose, yeah, I suppose. Okay. Well, anyway, Between the Buried and Me, progressive death metal outfit, have a new album out. It is the first part of a double album. It's called Automata 1. It's only 6 tracks long, and it's only about 36 minutes long. It's not particularly lengthy. I'm going to predict that you'll like this one more than Colours, though.
Oh, this is a completely different album to Colours. I mean, I haven't heard like any of their material from Between Colours to now, but they've clearly gone through a huge change, because Colours was more metalcore with other snippets of other genres splashed in there at intervals, whereas this is very much... They
have sort of headed more from death metal to progressive metal as time has gone on.
Very much
to the point that their last album, Coma Ecliptic, was their most progressive metal released to date, and now they've gone slightly more in the metalcore route with this album. Back to their earlier days.
All I can say, from when I heard this album, I was surprised from how progressive metally it was. So, and I did like the instrumentation quite a lot, actually. There are quite a lot of tracks that I did like.
I like this album. It's grown on me for sure. The first time I listened through it, I wasn't completely convinced, especially by Condemned to the Gallows, the first track, which I still think is probably the weakest on the album.
I probably agree.
I just found it to be a little dull by their standards with the opening with the chunky guitar chords, but nothing particularly interesting to accompany them. But I mean, there's so much within every single song, I can't pick out too many specific points because mostly they just go by pretty quickly. So I'll mention some wider points throughout the album, which I either liked or didn't like. The main one, which I'm unsure about, is the vocal performance throughout the album. I think that Thomas Giles is probably the most inconsistent metal vocalist working today. 60% of the time I think he's good, 30% of the time I think he's okay, 10% of the time I think he's just bad. And sometimes when the growls come in, I do think, oh, this is the mandatory growling part then.
I did feel that on Condemned to the Gallows during that Condemned to the Gallows. I can't do it section.
And then there's the worst part on the album vocally for me comes in the song Yellow Eyes, which is, there's an amazing point where this drum roll comes in and the synth comes over the top, perfectly matching the timbre and the rhythm of the drum rolls, and it sounds amazing. And then after that, it just breaks into the ugliest, jarring singing I've ever heard. It's not quite a growl, but it's kind of melodic at the same time. But it just sounds awful. Just sounds terrible. It doesn't, to me, either particularly fit in with the tone of the track at that point. It just seems to be ugly with no reason.
I have to say with the vocals, I didn't find them particularly inspired on this record. I didn't find them too much of a distraction either, apart from the growling in Condemned to the Gallows. There was one point in House Organ. I think it's just the shines down hook right at the end didn't really do it for me. But other than that, I don't think I wouldn't say I was put off by his vocal performance too much, really.
No. I think there are a lot of inspired moments on this album.
Definitely.
Those that fit in with each other. I think on the song Blot, for example, the sort of Egyptian-style guitar licks that happen throughout are lovely. On Condemned to the Gallows, the ending guitar line that just sweeps up and down the strings is, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is lovely.
Yeah, and I think, once again... I've forgotten his name now. I think it's Blake Richardson, the drummer, is one of my favourite metal drummers. He brings so much depth and so many great ideas to the music, and he's just so incredibly proficient in what he does.
Yeah, I have to agree. The drumming is great. And again, a lot of great instrumental moments. Some that I want to pick out is just the ascending guitar towards the end of Blot. I thought was so satisfying because it screeches up towards the end. It almost feels like it's towards the second half of the story where there's this description of millions of beings flying upwards, these robots or whatever they're supposed to be. It matched that so perfectly and so well. I really liked that. I really liked the use of time signatures on millions. I thought that was really nice, the 5/4. It was groovy. It was just interesting to listen to. So, yeah, some really, really good instrumentation.
There's an amazing bit which, because I've lost my notes, I can't remember what song it's in because there are just so many passages.
Yeah.
There's a great bit where the bass and the drums sort of match each other and the bassist is doing this quite complicated... It reminds me of the bass solo in Metropolis Part 1 by Dream Theater. It's pretty complex, and he manages to sustain it while the vocals are going over the top without either interfering with each other, and I just think it works extremely well. I'm impressed with this album. I've got to say, I think the quality of Between the Buried and Me's records was declining, and this is just proving that
this is a step up. I do have one major criticism of the record, though, and that's in the execution of the concept, and that's because I really liked the instrumentation so much. This was a bit of a downer for me because this is supposed to follow this concept of computers taking over. A perfectly fine concept, but the plot doesn't actually develop until 4 tracks in, until Millions.
I'd like to just point out at this point that's something that Between the Buried and Me have never been good at. So
well,
it's
enough,
not that it's not as bad for me because I kind of expected it, but I do get where you're coming from.
I think if you're going to market an album as a concept, which they are doing, I want that to be a strong point as well in the album, as well as the instrumentation. And for me, the pacing of, the music was fine. I thought the pacing of the music was fine, but the pacing of the story was very backloaded. Not that House Organ or Yellow Eyes were bad tracks, but they just didn't. They just needed some development in the story with them as well. And some of the lyrics, there were some okay lyrics, but some of the lyrics were a little bit
at points
not good.
I mean, it's even simple things like the bit in Yellow Eyes where he goes yellow, 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 and it's just so at odds with the really kind of crunching guitars at that point. It kind of made me laugh a bit.
I do want to read out this set of lyrics from Yellow Eyes, which I did not enjoy reading them at all because I was reading along. A cocoon leaking our own conclusions. We serve our hell well. Cope with disguise. Inner working dissect common phase neglect. I am tangible with no logic. It's honestly some of the most try-hard lyrics perhaps...
to be honest, I'm actually struggling to think of many metal albums of this sort of genre which managed to successfully pull off their concept.
Okay. I think that's fair.
The only one I can think of at the moment is Terminal Redux by Vector, but even then, it's not as good as...
I think you can give some allowance because the genre is very dramatic. You can have some leeway for some cheese and some drama, but I just felt here I couldn't really take it all that seriously. I could only really take it seriously towards, again, the final few tracks where the story's progressing, and that's what the focus of the lyrics is on. So that's one complaint of the album. It didn't completely destroy my experience at all because I did enjoy the music. So that's my main criticism out the way.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you like this more than Colours. I think there are quite a few between the Buried in Me albums you would quite like, actually. I think that The Great Misdirect is one that you would really appreciate, which is the one that followed Colours. But as far as the band goes, there hasn't been a release by them for I think 2 albums now, which I've been that excited for. They had the Parallax Hypersleep Dialogues, which people seem to like, and I thought was just a bit... and then Coma Ecliptic has got some of their most boring songwriting to date on it. So I'm glad that this is a bit of a step up.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that they can, really pull off the concept more with the second half of the album.
I'm hoping so too, because maybe it was just a bit of a filler towards the first half until we're getting into the story, and then the second half will be full story, full plot, full concept, and
we'll have to see.
It'll be good.
We'll be able to compare the second half to the first half and see
when
how
it comes out.
But, this has really filled me with hope for the band. I thought that they were on a dying path like Muse. Sorry to bring up that sore spot, Joe. Clutch your heart.
Okay, well, back to Automata 1. I'm happy giving this a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I would give it 7, possibly a strong 7 on a good day.
Yeah,
it's good.
I think it's a good... I would recommend this to prog metalers, definitely.
It doesn't outstay its welcome, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, well, it's 35 minutes, so it's
6 tracks, and one of those tracks is 1 minute long.
Yeah. I suppose that's another... I thought Gold Distance could have just been put onto Blot, really. It felt like an intro to Blot.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, it's fine as it is, that's just...
Because I haven't been... the only times I've listened to this song was on my phone. Not even my iPod, on my phone.
Oh.
So I couldn't actually see when the songs were changing, because quite often they lead into each other.
Yeah.
So it was only after I looked at the track list again, I went, oh, okay, there's that 1 minute track in there. I do not remember it. And that's because it sounds like the start of Blot.
Yeah.
That's the end of the podcast.
End of the podcast.
Let's talk about these albums and what we would do to the Ducks.
Oh, do to the Ducks. To be honest, there aren't any that I'm going to... Well, no albums that I'm going to shoot, really, because Young Fathers, perhaps not for me, but still very enjoyable record.
I would give them a pat on the head.
I would
give my bread to a small child next to me that wants to desperately feed the ducks.
I'd probably direct the ducks to ones that... the Young Fathers to people who would like them more.
Yeah.
Perhaps. And Ed Schrader, well, I've already waxed lyrical about Ed Schrader's music beat and how much I enjoyed their album, so...
Ed Schrader's music beat gets a bigger pat on the head from me.
I give them... I'm going to France to buy my bread.
Just give them a few crumbs.
And then Anna von Hausswolff. again.
Like,
those two albums are going to feature on my end of year list hard. Those two albums, I'm so impressed by both of them. But
Anna von Hausswolff duck, I'm unsure. I think I'm just going to put down the loaf of bread and walk away and let Anna von Hausswolff take as much as she likes.
Yeah,
because
she is scary.
I mean, she's scary, and I don't really know how much I want to give her. So
fair enough. And between the Buried in Me, I give them bread as well.
Yeah, I'd give them a bit of bread. Yeah. Not least for the fact that they've improved.
Yeah. Let's shoot Quavo, though.
Oh, yeah, let's shoot Quavo duck. It's Mother's Day today, so I'm going to serve duck in orange sauce. Actually, I don't think I'd want to feed Quavo to anyone.
We shouldn't be even going after Quavo. It's Iggy Azalea's song. We can,
I think anything Quavo touches turns into solid shit, though.
Very, 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 very,
if someone wants to disprove me, please do.
Yes, please do. In fact, I would like to see that disproof as well. I like being challenged. I like being challenged.
No, this song's not going to challenge you in the slightest.
No, not at all. And then, of course, everything, good, but...
Yeah, they get a pat on the head.
Yeah.
Because, it's decent, not as good as their other stuff. Janelle Monae gets all of the bread.
Oh, well, I'm still an Ed Schrader and Anna von Hausswolff kind of person.
She gets all of my bread.
Janelle Monae is becoming a queen of music, I think. We'll see.
And seeing as the tallest man on earth seems to desperately want to be a bird with some of his lyricism, this fits quite well. He can be a duck and I'll give him some bread.
Yeah. I've got just a couple of shout-outs that I want to do. Park Ji-ha, her album Communion, was released in the West today. It was released originally in 2016 in Korea, but of course I never heard it because it wasn't released in the West, but now it has. And it's another one of those albums that I'm really, really highly loving at the moment. It's because she takes classical Oriental music and fusing it with jazz, and so naturally I love it. It's dynamic, it's ambient, it's interesting, it's rich, so that's one I'm very much enjoying. And another jazz record that I'm also liking is the new Matthias Eek record, Ravensburg, which is a bit more standard jazz fare, just really well executed with some great performances and some really great rhythmic sections as well. So those are my shout outs.
Good stuff.
For this week.
I have one recommendation because I just haven't been able to listen to music this past 2 weeks due to stress at work, things breaking, and just all around general suckiness of the world. My friend showed me this album that came out just before these past 2 weeks, so I didn't really get an opportunity to recommend it. It is Evidence, with the album Whether or Not, spelled Weather. The whole album is on YouTube, and it's this really smooth West Coast rap. It's just really good. Love it.
I haven't heard that. I'll have to give that a check.
No, I would never have heard of it if it wasn't for my friend Nathan, so it was shout out to Nathan for recommending a good album. It's not one of my favourite albums of the year, but definitely worth checking out. And it's time to plug some things.
Plug.
I mean, we could just copy and paste clips from previous episodes here because we plug the same people every week.
We're plugging Stacey's Pop Culture Parlour because we will be on her charity event, which is on the 28th of April, and we will be on from 3 till 4.
In the afternoon, not in the morning.
Yeah,
we could have chosen the morning, but no.
No. And I actually wrote it down this time, so...
Hooray! We will be talking about music and
things.
Nerdy things.
We can be nerdy. My favourite.
We're good at being nerdy. And that will be live.
That is scary.
That is scary. Going to be doing it live.
I can't edit out all my blunders.
Yeah, take a shot every time one of us says, fair enough. Take a shot every time one of us sighs.
Honestly, I say fair enough way too much. I think I've been quite good this podcast, actually, but...
Yeah, I've been making an active effort to stop myself from saying it.
I wish I could hook myself up so I can just get electrocuted every time I say fair enough. All those other annoying things filler words that I say.
When you have to edit your own voice every 2 weeks, you notice all the irritating vocal habits you have.
Oh, and I
just feel sorry for the other people who have to listen to me.
I just think, why has no one told me this yet?
Also plugging Joe's YouTube channel, Mr. McTidge. Go there if you want to listen to incredibly in-depth points about music.
I made some points about Justin Timberlake and the...
It was a good video. He made a lot of points he couldn't make in our podcast about the album.
I think
you did, however, say that Wave was a good song.
Did I? I said it was like one of the middling ones.
You included it on the revised version of the album. Which
that's with the caveat that if he could make it better.
Yeah, he couldn't make that song better. That song's trash.
Fair enough. Yeah.
We'll be back in another couple of weeks. Hopefully my laptop will be repaired and we will be back to usual recording setup and I will have notes. How great would that be?
I think you've done well this podcast though. You've been kept up with it. You've been fluent, so... Yeah,
I have been talked down quite a lot by you on subjects like Ed Schrader's music beat and Anna von Hausswolff.
I think that's because I am so passionate about those albums that I've just been a little bit... Perhaps a little bit more overbearing than I would ever be to anyone on any other subject ever. So
I feel like also I need to set up some sort of alarm that I can set off just for when you start talking too in depth about musical terminology.
Lydian modes.
Lydian modes, so I can just be like
Joe being pretentious alert. Right.
Yep.
Okay, let's wrap this up then. Let's wrap this up. I've been Joe. I've had a very fun time. I highly recommend.
This has been a good 2 weeks. Good 2 weeks for music overall. If you
other good albums as well that I just haven't got round to listening to yet because I've been busy, but I'll probably shout out next podcast. So yeah.
But for now, I've been Nick.
I've been Joe.
And you've been listening to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. F Sharp A Sharp.